The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched for nearly a kilometer, its ceiling so high that clouds sometimes formed beneath the crystal dome that crowned it. 12 species had built this place together over 10,000 years, and they had designed it to make anyone who stood at its center feel very, very small. Ambassador Elena Vance did not feel small. She stood alone on the speaking platform, a tiny human figure surrounded by towering seats that rose like mountains on every side. Each seat held representatives of the elder species, beings who had ruled the stars when humanity was still learning to make fire. And every single one of them was staring down at her with expressions that ranged from contempt to pity. High Arbiter Zethran of the Velthari Dominion sat at the highest point, his scales shimmering with colors that indicated satisfaction. The Velthari were reptilian beings, cold and patient, and they had waited 3 decades to reach this moment. Beside him sat the Emirian trade lords, the Lissani scholars, the Keth Allen Forge Masters, and 8 other species who had decided that humanity had become a problem that needed solving. Ambassador Vance, Zethran spoke, his voice amplified to fill the entire chamber. The Council has reached its verdict regarding the status of your species within galactic civilization. Elena simply nodded, her hands folded calmly in front of her. She was 63 years old, with gray hair and warm brown eyes, and she had served as humanity's voice in this chamber for 22 years. She had known this day was coming for at least half that time. Humanity, Zethran continued, clearly enjoying every word, has been found guilty of cultural contamination, economic manipulation, and systematic integration beyond acceptable parameters. Your species has spread too far, too fast. You have made yourselves essential to systems you have no right to control. This council has determined that such influence cannot be allowed to continue. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. Elena noticed that not all species seemed pleased, but none of them spoke against the verdict. Fear of the Velthari kept many mouths closed. Therefore, Zethran declared, his scales now burning with triumphant gold, humanity is hereby reclassified as a dependent species under Article 7 of the Galactic Charter. Your colonies outside the Sol system will be absorbed into the territories of nearby member species. Your fleet will be reduced to defensive capabilities only. Your representatives will lose voting rights in this council, and all humans currently employed in critical infrastructure positions will be replaced within 1 standard year. The words hung in the air like poison. Elena heard gasps from somewhere in the upper galleries, where junior diplomats and observers watched. She knew that human journalists were broadcasting this moment to every colony, every station, every ship where her people lived and worked. Billions of humans were learning right now that their place among the stars had just been stripped away. Zethran leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the moment when the humans would finally show their true nature. Every species knew that humans were emotional creatures, prone to anger and irrational outbursts. Surely now their ambassador would rage, would threaten, would give the council the excuse it needed to take even harsher measures. What say you, Ambassador? Zethran asked, his voice dripping with false courtesy. Does humanity accept this verdict, or does your species wish to contest it? Elena was quiet for a long moment. In that silence, she thought about her daughter, who worked as a teacher on a Dasani colony world. She thought about her brother, who had spent 40 years as an engineer on a Keth Allen Forge station. She thought about the millions of humans who had built lives among the stars, who had married aliens and raised families and called strange worlds their homes. She thought about what they would lose, and then she thought about what the galaxy would lose without them. A small smile crossed her face, so brief that most observers missed it entirely. We understand, Elena said, her voice clear and steady. Humanity accepts this verdict. We will comply with all requirements. Our people will return to soul space within the time frame specified. Zethran blinked, his scales flickering with confusion. This was not the response he had expected. You accept? He repeated, as if he had not heard correctly. Yes, High Arbiter, Elena replied. You have made your position clear. We are not wanted here. We will leave, she bowed, a gesture of respect that somehow felt more like a farewell, and then she turned and walked toward the exit. Her footsteps echoed in the suddenly silent chamber. Wait, called Lord Emer of the Trade Consortium, his massive form shifting uneasily in his seat. Surely you wish to negotiate. There must be terms you want to discuss, concessions you want to request. Elena paused but did not turn around. No, Lord Emer, she said quietly. You have told us what you want. You want us gone. We will give you what you want. She continued walking. This is a trick, hissed Arbiter Zethran, his scales now showing angry red. The humans are planning something. They would not simply accept defeat. But Elena was already gone. The great doors closing behind her with a sound like thunder in her private quarters aboard the human diplomatic vessel. Elena Vance composed a single message and sent it to Earth with the highest priority clearance. It contained only 4 words, but those 4 words would change the galaxy forever. Begin protocol homecoming immediately. Within the hour, Earth's government activated a plan that had been prepared decades ago. A contingency that no one had ever truly believed would be necessary. Every human in Council space received the same message on their personal communicators, delivered in a warm, gentle voice that somehow made the words even more devastating. Citizens of Earth, the message began. The Galactic Council has decided that humanity is no longer welcome among the stars. We do not agree with this decision, but we will respect it. Effective immediately, all humans are requested to return to soul space. Transportation will be provided. Please bring only what you can carry. We are coming home. There were no threats in the message. There was no anger. There was no talk of revenge or retaliation. There was only a quiet sadness, like a guest who had been told they had overstayed their welcome on 1,000 worlds. Humans read the message and began to pack their bags. Marcus Webb, chief engineer of the Kethalan Forge world of Nethera Prime, stared at his communicator for a long time before he set it down. He had lived on this planet for 37 years. He had raised children here. His wife was buried in the red soil outside the city where they had built their home together, and now he was being told to leave. He looked around his office at the reactor controls he had maintained and improved for nearly 4 decades. He knew every wire, every circuit, every strange quirk of the ancient systems that powered this world. He had fixed problems that the original Keth Allen builders no longer understood. He had kept the lights on through 3 major crises that should have killed millions. His Cathalan supervisor, a being named Torath, who had worked beside him for 20 years, appeared in the doorway with an expression of shock on his stone-like face. Marcus, Torath said, his deep voice cracking. Tell me this is not true. Tell me you are not leaving. Marcus stood up slowly, his joints aching from decades of work in the planet's heavy gravity. I'm sorry, old friend, he said, and he meant it with all his heart. I have to go home, but this is your home, Torath protested. You have given everything to this world. You have saved us more times than I can count. Surely you can stay. Surely there is some exception. Marcus walked to his friend and placed a hand on Torath's shoulder. There is no exception, he said gently. Your council has spoken. We are not wanted here anymore, so we will leave. Torath's face showed something that Marcus had never seen on a Keth Allen before. Fear. Who will maintain the reactors? Torath whispered. Who will know what to do when the systems fail? Marcus looked at the control panels one last time, at the work of his lifetime. "I will leave notes," he said. "I will explain everything I can. You will have to learn the rest on your own." But both of them knew that some things could not be taught in notes. Some things could only be learned through decades of experience and love and dedication. And that love was leaving all across the galaxy. The same scene played out in different forms. Humans said goodbye to friends they had known for lifetimes. They closed businesses they had built from nothing. They kissed lovers they would never see again, and everywhere they went, they left behind the same message. We are not angry. We are not threatening. We are simply going home. The galaxy had asked them to leave, so they left. No threats, no war. Humans simply withdrew. The first week after the announcement was the strangest time anyone in the galaxy could remember. There was no violence. There were no protests. There were no angry speeches or burning flags or any of the chaos that the Galactic Council had prepared for. Instead, there was something far more unsettling. Humans simply did their jobs one last time, and then they left in the medical station orbiting Thesan Prime. Dr. Amara Say finished her morning rounds with the same warm smile she'd worn for 30 years. She checked on patients she had treated since they were children. She reviewed charts and adjusted medications and held the hands of those who were afraid. And when her shift ended, she gathered her staff together in the break room. "I want to thank all of you," she said, looking at the mix of human and the Sani faces before her. "Working here has been the greatest honor of my life. You have taught me so much about compassion and healing. I will never forget any of you." The Sani nurses stared at her with their large, gentle eyes filling with tears. They had heard the news, but none of them had truly believed it until this moment. "Dr. Asay," one of them said, a young male named Theron, who had been her student for 5 years. "Please, you cannot leave. The patients need you. We need you." Amara walked to him and embraced him, something that the Sani culture considered very intimate. Theron trembled in her arms. "I have left detailed notes on every patient," she said softly. "I have written down everything I know about the treatments I developed. You are a brilliant doctor, Theron. You will be able to continue my work, but your techniques," Theron whispered, "the way you diagnose illness just by looking at someone, the way you know exactly what to say to calm a frightened child, those things cannot be written in notes." Amara pulled back and looked at him with eyes that held 30 years of love for this place and these people. "No," she admitted, "those things cannot be written down. You will have to find your own way. I believe in you." She picked up the small bag that held her personal belongings, everything she was taking from a career that had saved hundreds of thousands of lives, and she walked out of the station. She did not look back, because she knew that, if she did, she would never be able to leave on the entertainment moon of Pleasure's Reach. The final show was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human performers had built this place into the greatest destination for art and joy in known space. Musicians, dancers, actors, comedians, and artists of every kind had created a world where beings from all species could come to forget their troubles and simply be happy. For 2 centuries, Pleasure's Reach had been a beacon of light in a sometimes dark universe. Now that light was going out, the final performance was not announced. It simply happened, as if every human on the moon had received the same unspoken signal. As night fell over the main amphitheater, humans took the stage one by one, playing songs that made audiences weep, performing plays that captured the full range of moral experience, dancing with a beauty that seemed to contain all the joy and sorrow of existence. Aliens from dozens of species sat in the audience, many of them crying openly. They did not fully understand why this was happening, but they understood that something precious was ending. A Velthari female, one of the few of her kind who had ever visited this place against the wishes of her government, sat in the front row with tears streaming down her scaled face. She had come to Pleasure's Reach in secret every year for 3 decades, because it was the only place in the galaxy where she felt truly alive. Why? She called out to a human singer who had just finished a song so beautiful that half the audience could not breathe. Why are you leaving us? What have we done? The singer, a young man with dark skin and a voice like honey, knelt at the edge of the stage and took her clawed hand in his. You have done nothing wrong, he said gently. Your leaders have asked us to go. We are respecting their wishes. That is all. But we did not ask, she sobbed. We did not want this. The young man smiled sadly. I know, he said, but we cannot stay where we are not wanted. It would not be right. He stood and helped her to her feet. And then he did something that no human had ever done with a Volthari. He danced with her, right there on the stage, while the orchestra played a waltz that seemed to last forever when the song ended. He bowed to her and walked off the stage into the darkness. The lights went out across Pleasure's Reach, and they did not come back on the trade routes of the Shroud Nebula. Captain Sarah Chen guided her ship through passages that no other species could navigate. The Maj Dadran Sarah Chen guided her ship through passages that no other species could navigate. The ZS Shroud was a region of twisted space, full of gravitational anomalies and radiation storms that destroyed conventional navigation systems. For centuries, it had been considered impassable, a barrier that cut the galaxy in half. Then the humans had come, and they had found a way through. No one understood how they did it. Human pilots spoke of feeling the currents of space, of knowing instinctively where the safe paths lay. They could not explain it in words, and no alien had ever been able to learn the technique. It was simply something that humans could do, and others could not. Captain Chen had been running the Shroud routes for 40 years. She knew every twist and turn, every hidden danger, every shortcut that could save days of travel time. Her cargo runs connected dozens of worlds that would otherwise be isolated from each other, bringing medicine to the sick and food to the hungry and hope to the desperate. Now she was making her final run. Her ship was loaded with medical supplies for a colony on the far side of the Shroud, a Ymirian outpost that relied entirely on human traders for survival. This would be the last delivery they would ever receive through the safe route. Captain, her first officer said, a young human woman named Rodriguez. The Ymirian trade lords are offering triple rates if we agree to stay. They say they will protect us from the council's orders. Chun laughed, but there was no humor in it. The same trade lords who voted in favor of the verdict? She asked. The same ones who called us a threat to galactic stability? Rodriguez nodded, her expression bitter. They are saying it was all the Velthari's idea, she said. They are claiming they were forced to vote that way. They are promising things will be different if we stay. Chun shook her head and focused on the swirling chaos outside her windows, guiding her ship through a passage that would kill any other pilot. We do not stay where we are not wanted, she said quietly. Even if they change their minds now, the damage is done. They showed us what they really think of us. We will not forget. So we just leave? Rodriguez asked. We abandon all the people who depend on us. Chun was silent for a long moment, her hands moving across the controls with the ease of 4 decades of practice. We are not abandoning them, she finally said. We are giving them exactly what they asked for, a galaxy without humans. Let them see how they like it. Rodriguez looked out at the impossible beauty of the Shroud, at the colors that danced and swirled in patterns that only human eyes seemed to appreciate. Will they be able to find another way through? She asked. No, Chun said simply. They will not. High Arbiter. Zethron watched the reports coming in from across the galaxy with growing unease. He had expected resistance. He had planned for it. His fleet was ready to crush any human uprising before it could begin. But there was no uprising. There was nothing but quiet cooperation. Humans were leaving their jobs and handing over their responsibilities with perfect professionalism. They were training replacements where possible and leaving detailed instructions where training was not possible. They were saying goodbye to friends and colleagues with genuine warmth and affection. It was, Zethran realized, deeply unsettling his aide. A nervous young Velthari named Korath entered the chamber with another stack of reports. "High Arbiter," Korath said, his scales pale with worry. "The economic ministers are requesting an emergency meeting. They say the human departure is happening faster than anticipated. Critical systems are already showing signs of strain." Zethran waved a dismissive claw. "Let them struggle," he said. "We survived for 10,000 years before humans came. We will survive without them. Their departure will cause some temporary disruption, nothing more. With respect, High Arbiter," Korath said carefully, "the ministers believe the disruption may be more serious than expected. The humans have been more deeply integrated into our systems than we realized. Then we will learn to do without them." Zethran snapped, his scales flashing with irritation. That was the entire point of this exercise. We wanted to reduce human influence. Now it is being reduced. This is victory. Korath bowed and retreated. But Zethran noticed that his aide's scales remained that troubling shade of worried gray in his heart. A small voice whispered that perhaps he had made a terrible mistake, but he silenced that voice, because he was High Arbiter of the Velthari Dominion. And High Arbiters did not make mistakes. The exodus continued, day after day, week after week, until the flow of humans heading towards soul space became a river, then a flood, then an ocean of ships stretching across the stars, and still, not one human raised a weapon, not one human spoke a threat. They simply went home, and the galaxy watched them go, not understanding that it was watching its own heart being torn away. No threats, no war. Humans simply withdrew 6 months after the last human ship crossed into soul space. The galaxy began to understand what it had lost. The first major disaster happened on Cathalar, the great forge world that had been producing starship components for 8,000 years. The main reactor complex, a massive facility that powered 3 continents, began showing warning signs that no one recognized. Edaroth, the engineer who had worked beside Marcus Webb for 2 decades, stared at the control panels with growing horror. Lights were flashing in patterns he had never seen before. Alarms were sounding with tones that were not in any manual. The entire system seemed to be speaking a language he did not understand. "What is happening?" demanded the Forge Master, a massive Kethalan covered in ceremonial armor who had come to the control room when the first alerts reached his office. "I do not know," Torath admitted, his stone fingers flying across controls that refused to respond. "These warning codes are not standard. Marcus must have created custom alerts for conditions we never anticipated. Then use his notes." The Forge Master growled. "The human left documentation. You told me this yourself." Torath pulled up the files that Marcus had left behind. Thousands of pages of careful instructions written in simple language that any engineer should be able to follow. He searched desperately for anything that matched the current situation. "There is nothing here," he said, his voice cracking with fear. He wrote about every problem he could think of, but this pattern does not match any of them. This is something he never imagined happening, or something he fixed so many times that he stopped thinking about it. The reactor core temperature climbed higher. Fail-safe systems activated, then failed. Backup systems came online, then overloaded. The entire complex was dying, and no one knew how to save it. "We need to evacuate the region," Torath said. "If the core breaches, everything within 100 kilometers will be destroyed." The Forge Master's face twisted with fury. "Do you know what you are saying?" he roared. 12 million Kethalan live in that zone. Our most important factories are there. You are telling me that we must abandon them because one human is not here to push the right buttons? Torath looked at his leader with eyes that held no hope. Yes, he said simply. That is exactly what I am telling you. The evacuation was chaos. There was not enough time to move everyone. When the reactor finally breached, 12,000 Kethalan died in the initial explosion. And 3 times that number died in the months that followed from radiation poisoning and starvation. Factories that survived could not operate without power. The other reactor complexes on the planet could not handle the additional load. Kethalar, one of the greatest industrial worlds in the galaxy, went dark and in a quiet room in soul space. Marcus Webb wept when he heard the news. The Emirian Trade Consortium was the next to fall for 200 years. Human merchants had run the impossible routes through the Shroud Nebula, connecting the two halves of the galaxy in a web of trade that made everyone wealthy. When the humans left, the consortium insisted that their own pilots could learn the routes. They were wrong. The first Emirian convoy to attempt the Shroud Passage disappeared without a trace. The second suffered a catastrophic navigation failure that left half the ships drifting helplessly until their life support ran out. The third refused to go at all, their crews staging a mutiny rather than face certain death within 3 months. Trade between the two halves of the galaxy stopped completely. Goods rotted in warehouses because they could not reach markets. Factories shut down because they could not receive raw materials. Entire economies collapsed because they had been built on the assumption that human traders would always be their lord. Eimer, the head of the consortium, sent desperate messages to Soul Space begging for human pilots to return. The messages were received politely and declined respectfully. "We appreciate your offer," wrote Director Catherine Okonkwo of Earth's External Affairs Office. "However, your council made clear that human involvement in galactic infrastructure was unwelcome. We are simply respecting that decision. We wish you success in finding alternative solutions." There were no alternative solutions. The Shroud remained impassable, and the galaxy remained divided on Thesan Prime. The medical crisis was more subtle but equally devastating. Dr. Theron, the young physician who had trained under Dr. Amara Osei, worked himself to exhaustion trying to save patients with techniques he did not fully understand. He followed her notes exactly, measuring dosages and timing treatments precisely as she had written. But the patients kept dying, and the Sani child came to him with a fever that should have been easy to treat. Theron administered the medication that Dr. Osei's notes recommended, and the child died within hours. He reviewed the notes again and again, searching for what he had done wrong, but he could find nothing. It was only later that he realized the truth. Dr. Osei's notes told him what to do, but not what to look for. She had been able to diagnose conditions by subtle signs that she had never thought to write down, because she saw them without thinking. The slight discoloration around the child's eyes, the particular rhythm of her breathing, the way she held her hands, all of these had been signals that a human doctor would have recognized. Instantly, Theron had looked at the same child and seen only a fever. The mortality rate at Thesan Prime Medical Station tripled within 6 months. Parents began refusing to bring their children for treatment, preferring to let them suffer at home rather than trust alien medicine delivered by doctors who did not understand. The Thesani ambassador went before the Galactic Council and begged for help. Our people are dying, she said, her gentle voice breaking with grief. A generation of children will be lost because we sent away the doctors who knew how to save them. Please, we must bring the humans back. High Arbiter Zethran shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His scales had been gray with worry for weeks, but he refused to admit that anything was wrong. The humans chose to leave, he said, though his voice lacked its former confidence. We did not force them out. We simply reclassified their status. They overreacted. They did exactly what you asked them to do, the Zani ambassador replied. And for the first time in recorded history, Adesani spoke with anger in the council chamber. You told them they were not wanted. They believed you. Now we are paying the price for your arrogance. The chamber erupted in arguments as species blamed each other for the disaster. Alliances that had lasted millennia shattered in minutes. Friendships that had survived wars could not survive the realization that they were all going to suffer together. But the worst was yet to come. It started slowly. So slowly that no one noticed at first. A slight increase in mental health problems on distant colony worlds. A rise in what alien psychologists called existential despair. A growing sense of emptiness that seemed to spread from star system to star system. Then someone made the connection. The worlds most affected were the ones where human entertainers had been most active. The species that had consumed the most human art and music and stories were the ones falling into the deepest depression. The galaxy had not realized how much human joy had sustained it for 2 centuries. Humans had been the storytellers of the stars. Their films had made aliens laugh and cry. Their music had given voice to emotions that other species could not express. Their games had created worlds where anyone could be a hero. Their art had shown the universe its own beauty reflected through human eyes. Now all of that was gone. The entertainment channels went dark. The concert halls fell silent. The theaters closed their doors. And across 1,000 worlds, beings who had never known true sadness felt it for the first time. Suicide rates climbed on species that had never experienced suicide before. Children stopped playing. Adults stopped working. Entire civilizations seemed to be folding in on themselves, crushed by a weight they could not name. A Velthari psychologist studying the phenomenon called it the Great Emptiness. He wrote that humans had somehow been providing something essential to the emotional health of the galaxy, something that no other species could produce, and without it, the universe had become a colder and darker place. His report was suppressed by High Arbiter Zethron, who still refused to admit that anything was wrong. But Zethron could not suppress the truth forever as the first year of the withdrawal came to a close. He received a message that he had been dreading. It was from the Velthari Military High Command, and it contained 3 words that changed everything. Civil war imminent. The people of the Velthari Dominion had learned what their leader had done. They had seen the factories close and the hospitals fail and the joy drain out of their lives. And they blamed Zethram. Revolts broke out on 3 Dominion worlds. The military split into factions. And for the first time in 8,000 years, Velthari killed Velthari in the streets, sat alone in his chambers as his empire crumbled around him. And he finally allowed himself to ask the question he had been avoiding for months. What have I done? The answer came from the humans themselves, in a message delivered by a diplomatic courier who had been waiting at the edge of soul space for exactly this moment. High Arbiter Zethron. The message read, "We have watched the events of the past year with great sadness. We did not want this. We never wanted this. But you asked us to leave. No threats, no war. Humans simply withdrew. 50 years passed, and the galaxy changed beyond recognition. The Galactic Council fractured within the first decade. Species that had cooperated for millennia turned on each other as resources grew scarce and old grudges resurfaced. The Velthari Dominion collapsed into civil war, then broke apart into a dozen smaller states that spent their remaining energy fighting among themselves. The Emirian Trade Consortium became a hollow shell. Its wealth evaporated. Its influence reduced to begging for scraps from neighbors who no longer needed them. Wars broke out, not against humanity, but between species that had once called each other friends. Without the shroud routes connecting the 2 halves of the galaxy, entire regions became isolated. Without human engineers maintaining aging infrastructure, technology began to fail. Without human doctors sharing their impossible intuition, diseases spread unchecked. And without human storytellers bringing joy to the stars, depression became the normal state of existence for billions of beings. The elder species, who had ruled space for 10,000 years, discovered that their civilization had been built on foundations they no longer understood. They had forgotten too much, relied on others too long, and when those others left, the knowledge left with them. Meanwhile, in soul space, humanity flourished cut off from the galaxy's problems. Humans turned their attention inward and achieved things that the elder species would have called impossible. Mars became a garden world. Its red deserts transformed into forests and oceans through techniques that human scientists had developed in their spare time while working for alien masters. Venus, once a hellscape of crushing pressure and acid rain, was tamed and cooled until it became a paradise of floating cities and endless sunsets. The asteroid belt became a hive of industry, producing everything humanity needed without any dependence on outside trade. Europa's oceans were explored and found to contain wonders that no alien had ever imagined. And Earth itself, freed from the burden of being the galaxy's servant, healed wounds that had been open for centuries. The solar system became a place of unimaginable beauty, a testament to what humans could achieve when they worked for themselves instead of others. And the refugees began to arrive. The first was a Dasani child named Mirren, only 8 years old, who had been smuggled out of council space by parents desperate to save her from a plague that alien doctors could not treat. Her family's ship was damaged and drifting when a human patrol found them at the edge of soul space. The patrol captain, a woman named Commander Joyce Adeyemi, looked at the tiny alien girl with the large eyes and the fever-flushed skin, and she made a decision that would echo through history. "Bring them aboard," she said. "Get this child to a medical facility immediately." "Commander," her first officer protested, "our orders are to turn back any alien vessels. We are not supposed to allow entry without authorization from Earth." Commander Adeyemi turned to face him with eyes that held no patience for bureaucracy. "I did not join the fleet to watch children die," she said quietly. "Contact Earth and tell them I am bringing in refugees. If they want to court-martial me, they can do it after this girl is safe." Mirren survived. Human doctors diagnosed her condition in minutes and treated it in hours. Within a week, she was running through the corridors of the medical station, laughing with human children who had never seen a Dasani before, but who immediately adopted her as one of their own. Her parents knelt before Commander Adeyemi with tears streaming down their faces. "We can never repay you," they said. "Our own people could not save her. Only humans could. We do not understand why you helped us after what our council did to your people." Commander Adeyemi helped them to their feet with gentle hands. "What your council did is not your fault," she said. "You are parents who love their daughter. We are humans who cannot watch a child suffer. That is all that matters." Word spread through the galaxy like fire. Humans were accepting refugees. Humans were healing the sick. Humans were offering sanctuary to anyone who could reach soul space. The trickle became a flood. Ships arrived from every species, carrying the desperate and the dying, the persecuted and the hopeless. They came from Velthury worlds where civil war had destroyed everything they loved. They came from Amirian stations where starvation had become normal. They came from Kethalan colonies where radiation sickness was passed from parent to child like a terrible inheritance, and the humans welcomed them all. There were no conditions, no requirements, no loyalty tests or political examinations. Anyone who reached soul space was offered shelter, food, medical care, and the chance to build a new life. The only rule was simple. In soul space, everyone was equal, and everyone was family. The refugees brought stories with them, stories of what the galaxy had become without humans. They spoke of cities falling into ruin because no one knew how to maintain them. They spoke of children dying from diseases that had been cured centuries ago because the cures required human hands to make them work. They spoke of a creeping hopelessness that had infected every world, a sense that the best days were over and would never return, and they spoke of soul space with a reverence that bordered on worship. It is paradise. They told their friends and families in messages sent at great risk across the dying galaxy. The humans have built something beautiful beyond words. Cities that sing in the wind, gardens that float among the clouds, medicine that can heal anything, art that makes you remember what joy feels like. If you can reach them, come. If you cannot, remember that paradise exists, even if you never see it. High Arbiter Zethron, stripped of his title years ago and living in exile on a minor Velthari world, heard these stories with a mixture of shame and longing. He was old now, his scales faded and cracked, his body failing, his mind still sharp enough to understand exactly how badly he had failed. He had wanted to diminish humanity. Instead, he had released them. He had wanted to make them dependent on the Council. Instead, he had shown them that they needed no one but themselves. He had wanted to prove that the galaxy was stronger without human influence. Instead, he had proven that humans were the strength the galaxy never knew it had in his private journals, which would be found after his death and become one of the most studied documents in galactic history. He wrote words that would haunt the elder species forever. We thought we were punishing them. We were releasing them. They never needed us. We only ever needed them. And now they have built heaven while we have built hell. This is what we deserve. This is justice. A year before his death, Zethron sent a request to Earth, asking permission to visit soul space before he died. He did not ask to stay, only to see with his own eyes what humanity had created. The request was granted. A human ship came to collect him, piloted by a young woman who looked at the decrepit old Velthari with neither hatred nor pity, only a kind of gentle curiosity. "You are the one who did this," she said, as they traveled towards Sol. "The one who made us leave?" Zethron nodded, his scales shifting to shame gray. "I am," he admitted. "I have no excuse. I was afraid of your species, afraid of what you might become. I thought that if I could limit your influence, I could keep the galaxy safe. Instead, I destroyed the galaxy." The young pilot was quiet for a long moment. "My grandmother was a doctor on Thiessen Prime," she finally said. "She came home when the withdrawal began. She cried for months. She felt like she was abandoning her patients." Zethron closed his eyes in pain. "But she also said something I never forgot." The pilot continued. "She said that humans are not meant to serve. We are meant to share. There is a difference. When you serve, you give and give until there is nothing left. When you share, you give what you can and receive in return. The galaxy wanted us to serve. It never wanted to share. That is why we had to leave. And now?" Zethron asked, "What do humans want now?" The pilot smiled, and it was the first genuine smile Zethron had seen in decades. "Now we share with those who want to share with us," she said. "The refugees who come here are not servants or subjects. They are neighbors and friends. They bring their own gifts, and we welcome those gifts. That is what the galaxy should have been all along." They arrived at Earth, and Zethron saw what humanity had built. He saw cities that rose like dreams from green hills. He saw children of a dozen species playing together in parks that seemed to go on forever. He saw hospitals where no one was turned away, and schools where every mind was treasured. He saw art galleries filled with wonders and theaters that echoed, with laughter and music halls where songs never stopped. Playing, he saw paradise, and he understood, at last, that he had been afraid of the wrong thing all along. He had been afraid of human power, of human influence, of what humans might take from the galaxy. He had never understood that humans did not want to take anything. They only wanted to give. He lived his final year on Earth, welcome not as a prisoner or a guest, but as a neighbor. He died surrounded by human doctors who had treated him with the same care they gave to their own people. His final breath a whisper of thanks. His last journal entry was found on the tablet beside his bed. I spent my life fearing humans. He had written, now I die loving them. I only wish I had been wise enough to love them sooner. To any who read this, do not make my mistake. Do not fear what you do not understand. Learn from humans, not because they are. 100 years after the withdrawal, the galaxy sent its answer. They came not as conquerors or diplomats or representatives of any council. There was no council left to represent. They came as individuals, as survivors, as beings who had inherited the ruins of their ancestors' arrogance, and who had decided that pride was a luxury they could no longer afford. Their ships gathered at the edge of soul space. Hundreds of vessels from dozens of species, none of them armed. All of them carrying a single message, please. The delegation that stepped onto the landing platform at New Geneva was unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. They were young Velvery, whose scales showed no memory of the old empire. There were the Sani doctors who had grown up hearing legends of human medicine. There were Amirian traders who had never known a time when the shroud routes were open. There were Cathalan engineers who had spent their lives trying to understand machines their ancestors had forgotten. And at the front of the delegation walked a Thessani woman named Mirren, 93 years old now, who had once been a sick child carried across the stars by desperate parents. She had lived her entire adult life in soul space, had become a citizen and a teacher and a mother. And now she had been chosen to speak for those who wished to bridge the gap between past and future. Director Yuki Tanaka waited for them at the top of the platform steps, her silver hair gleaming in the sunlight. She was the great-granddaughter of refugees from the withdrawal era, a leader who had grown up knowing that humanity had once been cast out of the galaxy and had chosen to build something beautiful anyway. Behind her stretched the city of New Geneva, and it was everything the stories had promised and more. Towers of crystal and living wood rose toward clouds that were carefully tended to bring gentle rain at the perfect times. Gardens floated between buildings, connected by bridges that seemed too delicate to hold weight but never failed. Music drifted from somewhere distant, a melody that changed with the time of day and the season of the year. And everywhere, there were people of all species walking together, talking together, living together in a peace that the old galaxy had never achieved. Mirren climbed the steps slowly, her old bones aching, her hearts pounding with emotion. She had been asked to deliver the message of the delegation. But as she looked at the city that had been her home for 8 decades, she found that the words she had prepared seemed inadequate. Director Tanaka, she began, her voice wavering. I come to you representing those who wish to apologize for what our ancestors did. 100 years ago, the Galactic Council told your people that they were not wanted. That decision destroyed our civilization and broke our spirits. We cannot undo what was done. We can only ask, is there still a place for us among you? Director Tanaka listened with an expression of deep compassion. She had heard stories of the old galaxy all her life, but meeting the survivors in person touched something in her heart that words could not reach. Elder Mirren, she said gently, you do not need to apologize. You were a child when the withdrawal began. None of those who stand behind you were responsible for the Council's decision, and even those who made that decision are long dead. We do not hold grudges against the dead, but the damage remains, Mirren said, tears forming in her large Thessani eyes. Our worlds are broken. Our people are scattered. We have lost so much knowledge and so many lives. We come to you not because we deserve your help, but because we have nowhere else to turn. Director Tanaka stepped forward and took Mirren's hands in her own. a gesture of comfort that transcended species. "Let me tell you something about humanity," she said, speaking loudly enough for the entire delegation to hear. "We are not perfect. We have made terrible mistakes in our history, mistakes that cause suffering beyond measure. But we have also learned that the past does not have to determine the future. We can choose to be better. We can choose to forgive. We can choose to build something new from the ashes of what was destroyed." She turned to address the full delegation, her voice carrying across the platform with the clarity of someone who had been preparing for this moment her entire life. "We hold no grudge against you," she said. "We never did. When your council told us we were not welcome, we believed them. We went home. We built something beautiful. And we discovered that we were happy." She paused, and her voice softened with something like longing. "But we also discovered that we missed you. We missed the friends we had made among your people. We missed the sharing of cultures and ideas. We missed being part of something larger than ourselves. Isolation taught us many things, but the most important lesson was this: we were never meant to be alone." The delegation listened in silence, barely daring to breathe. "So here is our answer to your question," Director Tanaka continued. "We will not rejoin any council that seeks to rule over us. We will not submit to laws written by those who once cast us out. We will not pretend that the past did not happen or that all wounds are healed." Several members of the delegation lowered their heads in disappointment, expecting rejection, but Director Tanaka smiled, and it was like the sun coming out after a century of clouds. "However," she said, "our borders are open. They have been open for 50 years, welcoming anyone who needed sanctuary. Now we extend a different invitation. Come not as refugees but as partners. Come not as supplicants but as equals. Bring your knowledge and your culture and your stories, and we will share ours in return. Let us build something new together, something that neither humans nor any other species could build alone." She spread her arms wide, encompassing the city behind her, the planet beneath her, the entire soul system that humanity had transformed into a garden. "This is what we offer," she said. "Not charity, not dominance, not the old ways that failed everyone. We offer friendship, freely given and freely received. We offer cooperation with respect for all. We offer a future where no species is dependent on another, and all species lift each other up." She stepped closer to the delegation, and her voice became almost intimate. "We do not need to threaten. We do not need to conquer. We only ever needed to be ourselves. Now we invite you to do the same. Be yourselves. Share what makes you unique. And let us see what miracles we can create together." The silence stretched for a long moment. Then Mirren, her tears flowing freely now, stepped forward and embraced Director Tanaka. The human held the Dasani gently, and the delegation watched as a century of separation ended in a single gesture of love. "We accept," Mirren whispered, "with all our hearts. We accept." Within the hour, the first ships began landing. Within the day, the first conversations were beginning. Within the week, the first joint projects were taking shape. Within the month, the galaxy had changed forever. Human engineers traveled to broken worlds and began teaching their new partners how to rebuild. Human doctors opened clinics and trained alien students in techniques that had seemed like magic. Human artists collaborated with alien creators to produce works of beauty that neither could have imagined alone. And human storytellers, for the first time in 100 years, told stories that were heard across the stars. But this time, it was different. This time, the galaxy did not treat humans as servants or threats. This time, humans did not try to become essential to systems they did not control. This time, everyone shared equally, giving what they could and receiving what they needed, building something that belonged to all of them. The new era had a name: given to it by a Velthari poet who had grown up on Earth, and who had learned to love both the species that had raised him and the species that had welcomed him. He called it the age of sharing, and in schools across the galaxy, children learned a new saying, one that would be passed down through generations and across species and into the hearts of beings not yet born. Never ask humans to leave. They were taught they might actually do it, but the lesson was not about fear. It was about understanding. It was about recognizing that every species has gifts to offer, and that those gifts are precious, and that casting anyone out diminishes everyone on the anniversary of the withdrawal, now a galactic holiday called Homecoming Day. Beings of all species gathered in their homes and their communities, and their places of worship to remember what had been lost and to celebrate what had been found. They told stories of the dark century when humans were gone. They wept for those who had died from the absence of human care. They laughed at the arrogance of ancestors who thought they could rule without partnership. And they gave thanks for the wisdom that had finally brought everyone together. And in New Geneva, every year, Director Tanaka's speech was replayed, the words echoing across a healed galaxy. We do not need to threaten. We do not need to conquer. We only ever needed to be ourselves. The humans had proven it by leaving. They had proven it again by welcoming. And they continued to prove it every day, simply by being who they had always been, a species that knew how to love, and that refused to apologize for it. The universe was vast and cold and often cruel, but humans had discovered the secret to warming it. They simply shared their fire, and the fire, once shared, never went out centuries later. When the age of sharing had become the normal state of the galaxy, and no living being remembered a time of conflict, historians would look back and marvel at how close everything had come.